Oh my God, no shot. It's gonna be over Israel. Breaking points.
You move to Dave Smith?
Oh, Ryan Grimm is here. Of course, he's gonna side with Dave Smith on this. No shot. Oh God.
Should we talk about Dave? Okay, I got two clips. So what do you guys want to start with? Do you want to start with his lived experience thing about how you have to be able to have been to Israel?
Yes.
Before you're allowed to talk about it? Okay.
Let's start with that.
Can we just say, though, off the top here, that what happened in this conversation is that Douglas Murray, who probably was under enormous pressure from pro-Israel folks and people who are pro-Ukraine and neoconservatives to stand up to Joe Rogan, he starts the interview by asking Joe Rogan if he can ask him a question about why he doesn't. Yeah. So it's sort of like the Oval Office meeting. That is genuinely important context for this 3-hour conversation, is that it started with Douglas Murray challenging Joe Rogan about why he had
an agenda.
Carroll.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He coming into this, he's mad at Joe. He's snippy, and what did Trump say? Yippee. He's yippee at Joe for, quote, not having enough pro-Israel or pro-Ukraine folks on the show. Which,
just to be clear, and I understand, I won't make fun of the lady on the bottom right because she had me on her show and she was nice to me. But for the other three, the collective IQ is like 170. Okay, if you add all three of them up. Douglas Murray was not upset because there weren't enough pro-Israel or pro-Ukraine people on. What he was upset about was that it seemed like there were never people of expertise on to push back on a lot of crazy shit that other people who aren't expertise come onto the show to say. Now, you would expect that anybody that's at least at a 5th grade reading comprehension level would have been able to understand that point, but I guess we have to give the most bad faith and retarded, I guess, like verbalizing the points of people that we disagree with. So that's good for that. Okay.
For, quote, not having enough pro-Israel or pro-Ukraine folks on the show, which, by the way, is not even true. There are definitely a lot of pro-Ukraine.
He didn't even know some of the guests. Joe ticked off all these guests. He's like, I've had Gad Saad. He said Barry.
We've had pro-Israel folks and, this one guy, and I can't remember his name, and you're like, oh, so you can't even remember the name of the guy you're calling anti-Semitic? But okay. Well, anyway, so what he does in the beginning is he, first of all, starts off with chastising Rogan for not having enough pro-Israel and pro-Ukraine folks on,
which is
preposterous.
So much if a guest came on our show and was like, actually, I think here's how you should produce your show. Here's how you should do your job. Like, there is no worse way to start a conversation with anyone than that, really.
Let's start with that.
And he accused Dave of hosting Ian Carroll. Like, he had no information. Really hot.
Remember, for alternative media, they love, one of the best things about alternative media is there are no standards. There's no standards. There's no editorial board. There's no boss that you have to answer to. So you can be as irresponsible and unhinged as you want to be. And so these people fucking hate it when you ask questions about, like, do you think this is, like, responsible platforming? Do you think this is a good idea? They hate it when people even suggest that that could be the case.
And was a little bit off. I thought Joe handled it really well, and it turned into a pretty interesting discussion.
Joe really held his cool. I will say,
Joe didn't hold his cool, by the way. He was completely out of his depth, and that's why he didn't say anything for basically 2 fucking hours. That's why he didn't. I don't know if you view that as holding your cool. He just had no clue what the conversation was about because he's learned nothing in any of the talks he's had with any of these people.
Say that Douglas is one of the smarmiest people I've ever seen on this, because he spends the entire thing tries to attack Smith's character, basically implies that Dave Smith is doing this for views or for clicks.
So he doesn't spend the entire time doing that. He does spend some time doing that, but it's fair to call into question somebody's character when that's literally part of what's at issue here. Why are you platforming people who seem to be pushing a certain type of thing? Why are you giving voice to things that you know can lead people down really scary roads of being, pro-Nazi or anti-America, whatever? Like, why? Like, that's a super fair question to ask.
Ridiculous. Dave has been in this business for a long time. Dave's most viral moment is not even anything to do with Israel.
I'm not trying to spam, but what was that guy's Warhammer channel name from like 5 minutes ago? His name online is Counterpoints. I don't know what his Warhammer channel name is, but if you search for like Counterpoints Politics or something, or Counterpoints Warhammer, you might find his YouTube channel.
Dave has been in this business for a long time. Dave's most viral moment is not even anything to do with Israel. It's about vaccines from 5 years ago. Not that Douglas would know anything about any of that, but he's like, oh, Dave, your shtick is Israel, right? Like implying that he's doing this for career purposes. Someone should tell me that, because I don't remember my career doing all that well because of any Israel criticism.
Isn't his career like at its apex right now? Was he ever more successful in the past? How many shows and everything? How much money are they making now? Why? All these people who are like, you think we're doing well criticizing Israel? Meanwhile, TikTok, every single video pro-Pally, every single thing pro-Pally. Meanwhile, alternative media, you think we're doing okay against AIPAC? Meanwhile, every single centrist and alt media candidate, or not candidate, every single alt media figure, every single centrist podcast, every single right-leaning commentator, fuck Israel, fuck Israel, fuck. Like, wow, you guys are so brave. It's the false, I don't know the name of this, what we would call this. It's like the false bravery, or the false... you're like, God, I'm standing against the whole world. And it's like, bro, literally everybody agrees with you. What the fuck are you talking? You guys are in the biggest hugbox echo chamber in the universe. Even the show where you brought me on to debate these things was basically a 2.5v1.
In fact, it's the opposite of Mr. Murray,
like, Sager,
who went from...
You're literally invited. You're part of the White House press corps now. You literally were asking Donald Trump questions a couple weeks ago.
Any Israel criticism. In fact, it's the opposite of Mr. Murray, who went from, this flitting about neoconservative has-been to, little flak jacket tour vests all over Israel. And so that is the
every
context.
Accusation.
Right. That's the context, is the concern trolling about, quote, expertise. And we'll get to that. But the best part was this, where he tries to use a literal woke style argument of, if you've never been to Israel, then you're not allowed to talk about it. Dave handled himself incredibly well, in my opinion, in this back and forth. So let's go ahead and take a listen to some of it.
Was no deficit of goods coming in. I've been plenty of times.
There was no deficit?
No, there are plenty.
No goods were kept out.
There are plenty. How many? Have you been to the crossing points?
No.
When were you last there at all?
I've never been.
You've never been?
Well, am I not allowed to talk about it now? I've never been to. Have you ever been to Nazi Germany? Are you allowed to have feelings with them?
You can't time travel. But
There are so many people posting clips of this that think that Dave owned Douglas Murray on this. The problem here also, and maybe I'm being too charitable to Douglas Murray because he only debates retards. The problem here is that I think in a traditional media world, or in a traditional journalist or historian world, you would kind of be expected to travel to some of these places, or at least to interview or talk to these people to get a better understanding of what's going on. And the thing is that if Douglas Murray would have posed this question to you, you should be aware that your answer, especially to a person like this, is probably going to sound pretty dumb, and you should have a prepared response for it, right? Have you been to Israel? No, I haven't been there. I have talked to a lot of people from there, though. I've read as much as I can. I've spoken to, or I've watched interviews with, XYZ people, whatever. Like, you would prepare, you'd know that you should respond to something like that, right? But the fact that Dave Smith was like, no, have you been in Nazi Germany?
Have you ever been to Nazi Germany? Are you allowed to have feelings with them?
You can't time travel, but you can. But you can travel.
Okay, but so what? So what's the point? Like,
no,
okay.
I find that
lots of people have been there and agree with me, and lots of people have been there and agree with you.
Yeah, but
so
if you're going to spend a year and a half talking about a place, you should at least do the courtesy of visiting it.
All right. I just think this is a non-argument.
Like, when he's like, all right. Like, he can't even acknowledge that there might be some benefit to going there and talking to people on the ground or seeing it with your own eyes. Like, there might be a benefit to it,
Okay. No, I think it's a non-argument.
But if you're an expert,
you have to go and touch the ground.
No, I think you have to see. I think it's a good idea to see stuff, particularly if you spend a career talking about something. Yes, I have a journalistic rule of trying.
Did you find benefit from going? For me personally, I did, but I went like explicitly with the intention of trying to broaden my understanding of it. That being said, you could travel to an area and be a fucking retard. You can travel to an area and have a bad take on a thing. Like, Murray's argument here really isn't that strong, but Dave Smith can't even argue against it because he's so stupid,
Never to talk about a country even in passing unless I've at least been there.
Okay.
Like, for Dave, like, if Dave Smith wasn't a dipshit, like, there are a lot of responses to this, arguably. Like, oh, well, I've got 7 Jewish friends who are all ultra rabid Zionists now, who all took birthright trips to Israel. Do you think they have a better perspective on the conflict than somebody who hasn't been there but's talked to or watched, competing sites talk about? Like, you could ask questions like that. And I think Murray would be forced to concede, well, not necessarily. Just because you travel to an area doesn't necessarily give you a broader perspective or a more accurate perspective on the conflict. You just might expect to see somebody do it. Maybe not, right? But Dave Smith can't even muster a response. He's just like incredulous that he would be asked that question.
It's sort of normal. It's a normal thing to do. You're talking about hang on, you're talking.
But I think it's important to ask questions like this, though, because in some respects, some of these things do matter. So, for instance, and I brought this up and nobody really cares because nobody actually gives a fuck about history. But for Finkelstein, the fact that Finkelstein is seen as some kind of like, quote unquote, historian when he can't speak any of the languages about the region from the region that he purports to be an expert on, that's a fantastic statement. That's pop history at best. There is no such thing as a historian that can't read a primary source. That's not a real historian, you know? But a lot of people consider Finkelstein to be like one of the preeminent Western historians on Israel-Palestine. That's very surprising. That should be shocking to you if you know anything about historians or history.
But that's sort of normal. It's a normal thing to do. You're talking about, hang on, you're talking about crossing points. And not only have you never been to a crossing point in either Egypt or in Israel, but you've never even been to the region.
Okay. Again, I think this is a non-argument. I don't understand.
No, it's not a non-argument.
Yeah, it is.
It's not a non-argument. If you're insisting that you're an expert of some kind, or not claiming you're an expert, but still talking about it, about the provisions going into Gaza or not, if you've never seen any...
And see, again, if Dave Smith knew anything besides just the conspiracy books he read, he could at least answer with, well, I've seen the COGAT reports, I think COGAT, which is the Israeli organization that's responsible for things inside and outside of the Gaza Strip, or I've seen, you know, what UNRWA has said about supplies making it in. I've seen reports from whatever media about the number of trucks. I've seen, like, but he can't speak to any of that because he only reads, he does read, I guess, which I give him props on that, but he reads conspiracy books exclusively. That's why when Dave Smith is arguing about a thing, he always says, and that's why the head of the CIA at the time said this, and that's why Kissinger said, he always has like these quotes and then just these narratives from these conspiracy books is all he actually studies.
Of this going on.
So you're not allowed to speak about things that you've read about. You can only speak about things that you've seen with your own eyes.
You can talk about what you want, as you're proving. But that is a different matter from spending an awfully long amount of time talking about an issue in a region you haven't even had the courtesy to visit whilst developing all of these views about it. I mean, now I slightly get an idea of where you're coming from. You've read about this blockade, and so you imagine that that's what it is. I imagine you've read all the people who say that Gaza was a concentration camp.
All right, we can call it there. This is the dumbest form of argumentation, and there's a layer to this too. I actually texted this to Dave. And
it's so annoying because now the analysis from these people is going to be analyzing this strictly on a, well, logically speaking, you don't logically have to travel to a particular area to have a good time on it, which is true, by the way. You don't necessarily have to. And there are arguments you can make against that. But it's kind of like when people like scream at me or other people, like, you can't just use Wikipedia to learn stuff. First of all, 99% of you would greatly benefit from just reading a Wikipedia article, because holy fuck, you guys are generally retarded as fuck. But if you want to levy a criticism at Wikipedia, what are the criticisms of Wikipedia? Most of these people can't actually do it. Like, there are a few really good criticisms of Wikipedia. These guys don't know any of them because they don't actually know what's wrong with it. They just like say a thing and that's it. So like when you say you don't need to be in an area to learn about it, that's true. But do you understand the arguments on both sides? Do you remember when, was it General de Gaulle talking to, was it Alexei Stukov? Even he says, what did he say?
So, Gerard, I suspect you have a good reason for pulling me away from my duties.
Your vodka can wait, my good Alexei. Come, stand here. You need to see this.
I know all about the Zerg, Gerard. We've all seen the tapes 100.
You've seen nothing. Dissecting a dead Zerg in a lab is one thing. Unleashing them on men is another. You must go into this with both eyes open. Once started...
See? You have to see it with your own eyes, you know? Sorry, okay.
And I was like, I kind of wish you'd said this.
While you're talking,
hey,
I'll
Douglas,
just put this up.
Yeah, I just want to be like, hey, Douglas, why do you think you got to go to the crossing points, my guy? Is it because you're on an Israeli BB-sponsored tour?
See, and they always bring out these, like, fucking retard... And I'm so curious I'm so curious what it's like being in the mind of a person like this. Like, if this person is alone in a room, do they cease to exist? I genuinely wonder this. Like, do they just sit there and stare at a wall like a cat that has dementia all day with their ears perking up if they think somebody's coming into the room and they have to turn on? Like, first of all, the accusation of like Israeli sponsored trips, like it's not even so much that, and this is what I mean, when you don't understand the arguments, you can't even argue for or against a particular thing. Like I said, there are good arguments that you could make against Murray for why a trip to someplace might not necessarily flesh out your perspective more, or why you can gain a perspective without it. But instead, we just go to this lowest base, like, didn't you get an Israeli funded trip? Didn't Israel pay you to fucking go there? Didn't they fucking give you money? Like, good one, dude. Real good criticisms.
My guy, is it because you're on an Israeli BB sponsored tour to go and to see this so that you go on the biggest platform in the world and say everything is fine? Why don't we call Ryan? Why don't you enlighten me and call, as you have, some of the people who live there and tell me what they have to say who are not members of Hamas? Right. Go ahead, Ryan. Tell me what the people who are on the other side of that crossing point have to say.
They say they can't find food.
Oh, okay.
And
got it.
And they have phone numbers. Has he spoken to them? Has he texted
Have you ever
with
been to Gaza?
But like because these guys are both stupid, you're making Murray's argument. Because Murray said, even in the clip they showed, this is why you interview people who are there. This is why, so you're saying, I can't believe Murray was trying to say you had to go there to learn anything when I can just call people who are there to learn stuff. Yeah, no shit. That's his argument, dipshit. You're literally repeating it back and acting like it's your own fucking argument.
Douglas, have you ever been to Gaza?
Yeah. Oh, that's
he shouldn't say anything about it.
Great point.
Yeah.
Dumbass.
They blocked on March 2nd. They said we're not letting any aid in. They said it publicly. Okay. Why does Dave Smith need to go fact check the claims by the Israeli government?
So, like, see, that's an argument that you could give, but Dave Smith didn't give that argument.
Right.
Yeah.
And the Palestinians on the other side confirmed it. We have both sides saying we're not letting aid in, but Dave, Murray needs to go see it.
Dave doesn't.
Weird.
Go ahead, Crystal.
Yeah. It does remind me so much of like it truly is like a very woke reminiscent argument because.
Oh fuck! I just wanted.
That there's
now it's woke for a journalist to say that you should travel to an area to gain a perspective on it. That's woke now. Okay.
Like it truly is like a very woke reminiscent argument. Because one of the tactics that is used to shut down debate is like, well, if you're not a member of that marginalized group, you can't speak on issues related to that marginalized group. And I'm not going to say that there's nothing to like hearing someone's quote unquote lived experience, but that is a common tactic to just say, you're not allowed to have a say at all. Don't care what you've read. Don't
he didn't
care
even
what
say
your
that. He literally
is,
said you can have an opinion on it. It's just curious you've never been there. Like,
if you don't have these particular characteristics, you don't get to weigh in.
True.
I've always objected to that, whether it was on the woke side, and it's the exact same thing here. It's also very like,
elitist.
You know, I don't know if he's always debated this way, but it's a very Piers Morgan panel debate tactic. They spend so much time just like attacking each other's character. You're a racist. You're an anti-Semite. You haven't even been there. And, you know, it's the type of thing that can play well.
I'm so curious. How many of these people criticized me on these grounds? Oh, Destiny, he just reads Wikipedia. And now when one of their own is criticized, well, you don't have to necessarily go. Like, I'm so curious how many of these exact people, because I know Sager's taken shots at me before. I don't know. Ryan Grimm and I have spoken before a few times. I don't know if he's taken those types of shots at me, but I'm curious how many of them have.
That format, when you just have like 15 minutes of yelling to filibuster and try to like out alpha the people on the panel. But when you actually have to sit there and explain yourself for hours on end and everyone gets a chance to see Dave be like, this is a non-argument. What are you talking about? It doesn't quite hit the same way as when you're just on some like Piers Morgan yell fest.
Well, that's really interesting because they actually started the entire podcast by Joe saying the reason we wanted to do this is because so many of these debates are held on shows like Piers Morgan, and basically it's so theatrical, and it's actually somewhat so it's expert. It's just this deification of expertise, which is very disappointing from Douglas Murray, by the way, who on wokeness, on media corruption, all of that, he actually was with Taibbi side by side in an Intelligence Squared debate against Malcolm Gladwell and Ryan, columnist at the New York Times, Michelle Goldberg, and wiped the floor with Malcolm Gladwell and Michelle Goldberg. And Douglas Murray did some heavy lifting in absolutely excoriating the corporate media and its corruption. And here, he's flipping around and saying that because Dave lacks expertise, my favorite moment of this entire conversation is when Dave goes, I'm a free American. I can say whatever I want. And I just was like, felt like wrapped in the American flag, was going to like shotgun a Miller Lite when he said that. It was glorious.
So fucking epic and
because
based.
that's his point. His point is that the audience is smart enough to make up their own minds if they are listening to a comedian who's really interested in history, or a, you know, ex-military guy who's really interested in history, do 30 hours of a podcast. The audience is smart enough to make up their minds, to do additional research. They don't need to be protected by expert gatekeepers in every situation. And it's just, I found it very unfortunate to see that flipped again.
Wow.
It's also very selective, because it's not enough. So he's decided Dave Smith's not an expert. But he's also decided that it's not sufficient for Dave Smith to read experts.
Yes, exactly.
Have studied this, been to the region, etc. So it's, you know, it's all very selective. And
this is a 25-minute talk. I wonder if they'll get into the factuality of any of the statements being made, or if it's all just going to be a fucking meta-analysis of the conversation. Like, are we actually going to get anywhere in this, or?
Very convenient when you get to be the expert, what when the expert opinion matters and can factor in, and when it doesn't, in his view.
Yes, this is the expertise part of which drove me crazy. And so there's a specific, you know, part of this. Let's take a listen to that.
Do also think that one of the bigger kind of the bigger picture dynamics to all of this is that we have at least since 9/11 been in a state of perpetual war. And all of these wars have been disasters. They have been so many lies involved in selling all of them. I mean, the whole Iraq war, the whole war in Afghanistan, just lying the whole way through. I mean, I remember literally having conversations with Green Berets in the middle of the war in Afghanistan, and they're like, George W. Bush is telling you that the army we're building up there is really successful. This thing's going to fall in a week without us. And then all through the Obama administration, it's just like lie after lie after lie with disastrous wars. And so this does create a fertile ground for people to say, I wonder if they were lying about all these wars.
Sure.
Again, I'm not really trying to argue about World War II. I'd rather argue about these wars today.
I think the interesting question is whether you're busy watering it.
Well, should you not talk about mistakes that were made overall?
Absolutely.
Okay, you should.
Absolutely.
Right.
I'm all for going back and looking at mistakes.
So what is your argument then?
It's a very weird thing to go back, zone in on a man, say this one thing is a mistake and should characterize him, and you ignore everything else.
You're taking him out of context when you're talking about Daryl, who's
not the
done
context.
What was it, 30 plus hours?
So what? 30 plus hours of podcasting. You do that in a week. I mean,
but it's a very different thing.
He's not doing a podcast like talking to people.
Okay, nor is he doing scholarly work, nor is he working in the archives. Clearly, come on. I mean, he is not the historian of our era.
He's not claiming to be.
Then read the historian.
This is like punching jelly.
No, but you don't consume his work.
What I'm saying, because I don't need to consume endless versions of a revisionist history. I understand.
But
I know
it's not
where this
revisionist
comes from.
history.
Okay, so that was about the Daryl Cooper thing. But that part I found very illuminating is this. He produced 30 hours of podcast. He goes, so what? You do that in a week. It's like Douglas is acting as if he is like one of the professors at Oxford that he got his undergraduate degree in English from. You are not that. Bro, you have written books about multiple different subjects. You are the definition of like a journalist.
Little dilettante, yeah.
Yeah, you're literally
influencer.
You are an influencer dilettante. You are a literal dilettante who flits about the world, writes neoconservatism and why we need it, and now madness of crowds and the strange death of your. It's like, Are you a fucking expert on immigration? Are you an expert on Western civilization because you
Have you ever been to Martyr Made?
Yeah, have you been to the Martyr Made podcast?
Have you listened?
Like,
he said he didn't listen. He said he didn't listen.
Doesn't even listen.
Right.
It's
comical.
The sheer arrogance. And Ryan, that was another thing that I really found about these Ziobots like Murray is that this guy is pushing like completely debunked stuff about October 7th, like it was fact. Like he talked about like mass rape on October 7th.
That hasn't been completely debunked, but people like Ryan Grimm pretend it is because he was part of The Intercept when they published a bullshit story claiming to have debunked it all or whatever. But nice.
It's like this close to talking about the babies thing. Right? And it was so obvious to me that he has not engaged with any even like surface level, Haaretz level criticism.
This show is purely surface level. Nothing past the surface level has ever been brought up on Breaking Points, but
of Israel, and that
he said he doesn't have
his
to.
Expertise, right? His expertise is that he's been there. It's just the purest form of wokeism, of like concern trolling about expertise.
True.
When you yourself have absolutely none. And I will say, like outside of Twitter, like Zionist Twitter, if you go look at the YouTube comments or the general reaction or anything, Murray's getting cooked. People can see this level of like sneering and concern trolling.
It's
and
over, boys.
People are like, "Oh, I wasn't in the studio with Douglas, so I can't have an opinion about how much of a dickhead he was." Just like it is. But like that's the level of argumentation that he has. That he brings us down to. It's ridiculous.
And it is comical in one breath to say that Dave can't comment on Israel because he hasn't been there.
That's not really what he said by the end of
a podcast that he's never listened to.
Yeah,
right.
Because I actually disagree with the other point. Like, you actually probably should listen to a podcast if you're going to have an opinion on the podcast.
Right, because the whole thing of having an opinion on the podcast is like the content of the podcast.
The content of the podcast.
Like, that's kind of the whole thing.
If you want to.
And nobody has done like listen, I disagree with Daryl on Churchill. I disagree with him on a lot. But if you listen to the podcast, absolutely nobody is doing what he is doing. The level, and Joe pointed this out, his Fear and Loathing in New Jerusalem starts from the emotional, visceral perspective of Jews who are fleeing pogroms. It's just absurd to act as though that is being put in the box of Pat Buchanan. It's not Pat Buchanan. It draws from Pat Buchanan, but it's not Pat Buchanan. And you don't know that unless you listen to it.
Wow.
That's another thing. I'm not even going to go into by the way, I love Daryl. Daryl's one of my brothers. Yes, I disagree with him. I actually text him often and be like, dude, you're totally wrong about all this. He's the guy who will send me books, obscure books about that he has on the Battle of Singapore. And so that it's beyond the character assassination.
It's a beautiful friendship.
It is a beautiful friendship. Just like Scheinbaum and Trump. But like beyond even the like surface level criticism, fine if people want to have it. For me, is that arrogance of Murray and a lot of these pro-Israel folks who resort to the most ad hominem and emotional attacks, concern trolling about expertise. And then someone like you, Ryan, who actually has reporting expertise, like knowledge and all of that of the region, is dismissed completely out of hand. And if someone like Dave, who is a consumer of your work or of Haaretz or any of that, is laughed out of the room, the idea is, and I genuinely would say this, is that the mean critic of Israel and of Israeli policy, and I mean this in the commentariat space, in my opinion, is 10 times more informed on the conflict than anybody who is just mindlessly sucking up their propaganda about October 7th or the war in Gaza or the ends. The other thing that I found preposterous, Ryan, is that throughout the podcast, he's like, Qatar is pumping money into our university system. Ryan, does he even know that Netanyahu is literally facing a corruption allegation over? Probably not. That's my point. He doesn't even know anything about the place that he spent so much time.
Right, and that's a huge. It's like the number one story in Israel right now. But it's structurally, if you are on the Dave Smith side, you must constantly engage with the pro-Israel side because it is the water that we're swimming in.
That's right.
If you are on Murray's side, you can actually just not read Drop Site. You can not watch this program. Like you can seal yourself off and just never encounter that. And so that's how you wind up with people repeating things that everyone already knows has been actually debunked by, like, even say like the BBC or somebody, but like not done it in a high profile enough way that it penetrated the pro-Israel bubble. So he can live that life. Yeah.
And they just want
or they don't care,
propaganda, and they just lie and don't expect to get called on it because it's emotionally uncomfortable to be like, well, actually, there wasn't a mass rape on October 7th.
Right.
And then you look like you're, being a Hamas apologist or whatever. Like there's some of that going on too. Let's not deny that many of these people are happy to just lie or just believe a reality, even though it's been debunked, because it fits with their view of what's going on here. And I just want to drill down on this point a little bit more. I mean, two things. Number one, it seems to me, I didn't watch the whole podcast. I just watched the clips that you showed. So I don't want to opine on a podcast that I haven't listened to.
Crystal, don't subject yourself to it. It's 3 hours.
I don't plan to.
You will get everything you need for the first 10 minutes.
But, with the invoking of Ian Carroll, the invoking of Daryl, it also feels like rather than dealing with the arguments of the person who's right in front of you, you want to construct a straw man of, Ian Carroll, there are some things. Daryl Cooper, there are definitely some things. Okay. They're not there. Dave Smith is there. What is his argument? Deal with his arguments rather than these other superfluous people who have been in the Joe Rogan podcast universe. Okay. That's number one. Number two, I want to say this view, and this is the same thing I said when the arguments about you can't have an opinion on certain things if you're not part of that marginalized group, whatever. It is fundamentally anti-democratic, small d democratic. Our government is sending our money to bomb these babies. We're not allowed to have an opinion because we haven't fucking been there. Are you kidding me? Seriously. We're all about to pay taxes. Taxes are due in 4 days?
Yeah, that's right.
We can't have an opinion on that. Be for real. We are obligated to have an opinion on what our government is doing in our name with our money to a trapped, starved, bombed population. If you are a citizen who cares about the direction of the country and the world, yes, you should have an opinion about that. And it doesn't require you going to the region, going to Israel, going on Bibi's press tour, going to the crossings, auditing what goods are... No, you get to have an opinion because this is a fucking allegedly democracy. So that is why that thing pisses me off so much. And especially, this is the way also, by the way, that liberal Zionists shut people down too. Oh, it's complicated and you just don't understand. This is what they do on, monetary policy. Oh, this is complicated. Just let the experts handle it. You just don't understand.
I got this all of the time on gender stuff, from the left, all of the time. And in all seriousness, it's
There's too many genders for you to understand.
Well, no, it's very similar. It's you are not. Are you a neuroscientist? Are you a biologist? Yeah. Are you a psychiatrist? No, it's a thing. That's a thing. It's just this blocking with the expertise.
I think that experts are important. I think it is really important to have people who have deeply studied fields, medicine, science, history. I think it is important to take in that information. But
was there any substantive analysis in the past 5 minutes, or was it nothing?
They can't tell you what your values are, right? They can't chew up your democratic food and spit it in your mouth and eat it for you. You have to engage with that content and think about the world for yourself. And yes, you are allowed to do that. That is the base. That is
She said she didn't even listen to the talk. Wait, Crystal Ball said that?
The foundation
they only watch clips?
upon which this country is allegedly built, and we fall short in many, many ways. But when you try to dumb down the population, don't worry your pretty little head. The experts over here, they get it. You don't. It's too complicated. You don't get to have an opinion. That is fundamentally anti-democratic. It is anti-populist. It is I am just repulsed by that whole direction. And by the way, think of when Dave Smith is talking about these experts that got us into the Iraq War, right? How did that go? These experts who, kept us in Afghanistan for decades. Yeah. How did that go? These
do you not see the issue? The experts were wrong on that. You should be removed from society, I think. In that case, fine. No, that's fine. Don't trust any expert on anything then. But then you don't get to benefit from anything any expert says anymore. You can't do that. You can't live in both worlds where you get to take advantage of. So whatever, whatever products you use for beauty, whatever clothing you wear that was manufactured by China, whatever medications you might take that came from big pharma, from research from experts, then you have to ditch all of it and go do your own shit. Otherwise, you can't sit here and in one world benefit from the world created to you by people who have expertise in their field. And then on the next hand, just try to destroy it constantly. It's bullshit. so stupid.
Experts that were part of, deregulating the financial industry. He didn't make these arguments. I'm making these arguments and crash the entire global economy. How did that go? How has deferring to experts and not
Do you think it's experts who have crashed the global economy right now?
Bring your pretty little head about these overly complicated topics. How has that worked out?
Yeah, COVID. We can go on forever.
Yeah. Well, that's a great. Douglas talked about COVID in that Taibbi debate, if I'm remembering correctly. And the last thing I want to say is that I'm sympathetic to a point that Douglas makes about losing the forest for the trees. I think that's sometimes what we get into when we're debating Gallipoli campaign and Churchill and all of that. I get it. Yeah.
Gallipoli, keep Gallipoli out of your mouth.
Yeah.
All right, but go on.
But you know what I'm saying.
You're not an expert, Emily.
I wasn't there. But I think that we do sometimes lose the forest for the trees because some of these trees have not been well evaluated over the course of the last century. And so in revisiting them and saying, oh, the experts lied, we sometimes assume that when we're looking at a tree, we're looking at the whole forest, or we get lost. Man, this is a tortured metaphor. So I'm sympathetic to that point. But the problem is the experts are the ones that continue to just completely lose trust because they're wrong about certain things. And then so to
wait, this continues to boil or waste fuel? Oh, no. Okay, just making sure.
Defer to experts, to say the experts got COVID wrong, but then to defer to them on Ukraine and Israel and act like anybody who is challenging those official narratives is siding with anti-Semites or with Putin.
Nobody does. Well, there might be some people that do this, but can we not engage with any of these arguments any better? It's not that all of you guys have become anti-Semitic. It's that sometimes you guys have literally lifted one-to-one every anti-Semitic talking point. It's not that you guys have become this, and it's fine, but then at least be willing to debate them. Don't just have your new Nazi revisionist history people go onto these shows and don't ever be challenged. They're literally making excuses for why, oh no, this guy should never have to debate his point ever. He should just be allowed to go on Tucker Carlson unchallenged and just give us revisionist history about everything relating to the Holocaust. Or, oh no, these people shouldn't have to, defend their point of view, the open place of podcast idea. Come on,
It is so unfortunate, and it's very telling, I think.
That's a great place to leave it, I think.
Wow.
Great show, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Well, it was extra special because we had you. It's nice having the whole crew.
How did the experts get COVID wrong? Because I think Murray believes in some form of, they fucked up on the lab leak thing or something. Now, I don't know.
Anything last, Ryan, in particular, are you looking at anything, working on any reporting you wanna highlight?
Oh, no, I should send this to Phil, Emily, but very cool story in Dropsite that we published yesterday afternoon, interview with a top Houthi leader who basically responded to Trump and Hegseth, who said, hey, if the Houthis stop bombing American ships, we'll stop bombing the Houthis. And they told Dropsite, we will stop bombing American ships then, if you will stop bombing us. They said we will continue to bomb Israeli ships. They're not allowed. They're not welcome through. But American ships, fine. We have no problem.
They can't, the fact that he would say this uncritically. Do you think they can't even ID which ships are going to Israel? You know that's not the case, right? What a stupid fucking we'll continue to engage in terrorism, but can you please just stop bombing us? This is such a bankrupt statement. How stupid can you be to say something that fucking retarded? And not a single person here thinks you're well. Maybe it's probably not good when people are just bombing trade ships. Maybe that's actually not a good thing, but nobody even thinks about it here. And all four of these people have the audacity to say, if you criticize Israel, everybody's going to come after you. Give me a fucking break. Oh my God. Unbelievable.
Problem with America. So now the question will be, did Trump and Hegseth mean Israeli ships under the definition of our ships?
We all know the answer to that.
Yeah, we know.
But it's good.
And Israel, Zog, Zionist-controlled government, Zionist-occupied government. True. That's so true. That's so true and based. How the Jews, or not the Jews, how Israel and the Zionists secretly control our entire government. And that's what they meant when they said our ships. They also meant Israeli ships because the Jews have control. The Zionists have controlled all of our government and are dictating our policy. It can't possibly be the case that maybe the United States just has an interest in seeing the perseverance of global trade, right? Nah.
To have it clarified.
Yeah.
Indeed. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Thanks to everybody out there. Appreciate you guys. We're going to have some announcements next week. I'm just going to tease that. Some big announcements all around. So stay tuned for that and have a great weekend. We will see you back here Monday.
you see friend of the stream PF Young's tweet about the Dave Smith combo? Yep. It was dumb.
For the second straight month in a row. This marked the first drop.
How long until we stop watching these? I feel like it's just like the propaganda outlet.
In consumer prices dating all the way back to the COVID pandemic. Prescription drug prices saw the largest monthly decline on record. Prices for airfare, used vehicles, and car insurance all decreased as well. And energy prices fell 2.4% in March, driven by plummeting gas prices around the country. Also yesterday, House Republicans answered President Trump's call to move forward the budget resolution and officially set the stage for the passage of one big, beautiful bill.
Wow.
The American economy will boom after this bill is passed and the rest of the president's pro-growth agenda goes into effect.
Wow.
The largest tax cuts and deregulation in history, coupled with our energy industry unleashed and renegotiated trade agreements that put America first, are the ultimate formula to usher in the golden age of America. On that note, more than 75 countries have now reached out to the Trump administration, eager to address the trade issues that have exploited America and hurt our workers in the process.
Crazy.
The phones have been ringing off the hook to make deals.
The phones! Oh, bro! Did somebody say phone? Did somebody say phone call? Hello?
And these countries wisely heeded President Trump's warning not to retaliate, and as a result, they were rewarded with a 90-day pause and substantially lower reciprocal tariff rates during this period so potential solutions can be achieved. Past presidents just willingly accepted the failed status quo on trade that ripped off our workers and our companies. But that's not who this president is. He creates his own leverage and negotiates deals better than anyone else who has sat in the Oval Office before him. And that process is currently underway. On another matter, the deadline for registration under the Alien Registration Act is today. All foreign nationals present in the United States longer than 30 days must register with the federal government. Failure to comply with this is a crime, punishable by fines, imprisonment, or both. As President Trump and Secretary Noem have both said, if you register and you leave now, you...
Wait, that means even people that are just like visiting? Ooh. Lena just left today. Do you think that, so if you're on your ESTA visa waivers, careful guys, hopefully you registered or something. Holy fuck. Let's fucking slow down. The eggs? Good one.
Choose to self-deport. You may have the opportunity to return later legally. But if not, you will be arrested, fined, deported, never to return to our country again. The Trump administration will continue to enforce our nation's immigration laws, and we will not pick and choose which laws to enforce. We must know who is in our country for the safety and the security of our homeland and for all American citizens.
So brave.
I also have a note from the First Lady to share with you on this Friday. On Tuesday this week, First Lady Melania Trump celebrated the advancement of the Take It Down Act in the House Energy and Commerce Committee. The important legislation passed the committee with bipartisan support, and as you may remember, the president talked about this bill in his address to a joint session of Congress last month. The First Lady remains dedicated to her championing child well-being, ensuring that every young person can thrive, and of course, championing her Be Best agenda.
Wow.
We urge Congress to swiftly pass this important legislation.
Please, Congress.
Here in our new media seat today, we have Jordan Berman. Jordan is a social media content creator and influencer and a lawyer who grew up following breaking down the news from a neutral perspective. Jordan is the host of her own podcast called Unbiased Politics, where she dissects the top stories from the week from a legal perspective. Jordan focuses on bringing back real journalism from a nonpartisan perspective and has mastered explaining complex legal decisions to a mass audience in the short-form context. Her two biggest platforms are TikTok and Instagram, where she has roughly 500,000 followers on each. With that, please kick us off, Jordan.
Thank God. Influencers. Yes.
And many married women, soon-to-be married women, are concerned that the new voter ID requirements may inhibit their access to the polls. What assurances can you give women voters in America to ease their concerns?
Who cares?
Sure. Well,
they're
the
women.
SAVE Act, as you mentioned, was passed by the House yesterday. This is the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act. I believe I'm getting that correct. And this act is a common sense measure. It would require proof of citizenship for voting.
Hello, it's just common sense. Duh.
In our elections, the Democrats have been fear-mongering about this bill, have been saying that married women, if their name has changed, they didn't change it on their identification, would not be able to vote. That is complete fallacy. There are outlined in the bill about how to avoid that. The president very much supports a common sense solution to ensuring that only citizens can engage in our elections. This is critical to improving the integrity of our elections and also the trust that American citizens need to have in our electoral process. So the president supports this bill, and that is a myth that has been proven wrong by the text of this bill. And I believe some of the co-sponsors of the bill have been very vocal in addressing that. And certainly I myself, as a married woman, would not stand before this podium if the president did not support such a common sense measure.
Epic.
Thank you. For my next question, I actually want to give a voice to the American people. I sourced a question from one of my listeners. Her name is Bryn. She is from Oregon. And she asked, what, if any, plans do you have, the administration, for the money that will be generated by tariffs imposed on foreign goods? How will the administration facilitate the development of American industries when many critical components, labor, parts, etc., are much cheaper and more feasible from foreign entities?
It's a great question from your listener, and I want to thank her for submitting it to you to ask. That's the part of the new media seat is so that everyday Americans across the country have a voice in this room. So thank you again for being here. Thanks for the question. The president's point about his trade and tariff agenda is to bolster our manufacturing industries here in our country, to bring down the cost of living here in our country.
Is she going to answer that question, or is she just going to state what the agenda is? It was a very particular question. Are we just not going to? We're just not going to answer that at all, I guess. Are these things even fucking growing?
To ensure that we are maintaining critical supply chains here in America. We cannot be dependent on countries like China if we want this country to be strong and wealthy. So the president wants to restore wealth to America by shoring up these jobs here at home, which will result in good paying jobs and higher wages for the American public. And so Americans should trust in that process. He effectively implemented tariffs in his first term while driving down the cost of living in this country, and that's what he's focused on doing against. Thank you.
As a follow-up question, can I just ask, are there any specific ideas that the administration has as to what that revenue, specific tariff revenue, will be used for?
Yes, to the heart of your question, the president has spoke about the trillions of dollars that he expects in revenue from tariffs and how we can use it to pay down our debt and to ensure that we are no longer faced with a crippling national debt in the trillions that is going to bankrupt our nation for future generations. So that money coming back home will make America in the green rather than in the red, which any small business owner across the country, I believe, can appreciate.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Kelly.
Hey.
Tomorrow there will be negotiations between the United States and Iran in Oman. What are the president's chief goals for that, and is he satisfied with how Iran is responding to this? They don't want direct face-to-face negotiations, instead sort of old-school shuttle diplomacy where they're in separate rooms and messages are passed back and forth. So is the president comfortable with the arrangement there, and what is the chief objective?
Well, I have spoken to both the president and also his national security team who will be engaged in these discussions. These will be direct talks with the Iranians, and I want to make that very clear. I also spoke to the president just last night about his goal when it comes to Iran, and he has reiterated repeatedly to all of you publicly and also privately to his team here at the White House, his ultimate goal and the ultimate objective is to ensure that Iran can never obtain a nuclear weapon. The president believes in diplomacy, direct talks, talking directly in the same room in order to achieve that goal. But he's made it very clear to the Iranians, and his national security team will as well, that all options are on the table, and Iran has a choice to make. You can agree to President Trump's demand, or there will be all hell to pay. And that's how the president feels. He feels very strongly about it.
And can you update us on Mr. Witkoff in Russia and what's happening with direct communications with Vladimir Putin?
I can confirm that Mr. Witkoff is in Russia to have direct communications with the Kremlin and with Vladimir Putin. This is another.
This guy didn't even know like the regions of Ukraine that were under threat. By the way, Witkoff is a fucking retard. But I'm glad that he's negotiating for us.
Step in the negotiating process towards a ceasefire and an ultimate peace deal in Russia and Ukraine. As these negotiations are ongoing, I obviously will not get ahead of the president or his team, but I think the president has been quite clear that he's been continually frustrated with both sides of this conflict, and he wants to see this fighting end. He wants the war to end. We believe we have leverage in negotiating a deal, to a peace deal, and we're going to use that leverage, and the president is determined to see this through.
Thanks, Caroline. President Trump has said China wants to make a deal on tariffs. The president says he has a great relationship with Chinese President Xi. He's willing to speak with him directly. Why doesn't the president just pick up the phone and get this ball going?
Yeah. All of the things the president just said are true. The president, as I said from the podium just a few days ago when I was up here, would be gracious if China intends to make a deal with the United States. If China continues to retaliate, it's not good for China. The United States of America is the strongest, best economy in the world, as evidenced by the more than 75 countries who have called the administration immediately to cut good deals. So the president wants to do what's right for the American people. He wants to see fair trade practices around the globe, and that's his intention and his goal.
So is he waiting for China to make the first move here?
I'm not going to comment on communications that are happening or may not be happening, or either way. We'll leave it to our national security team to get these discussions underway. And as always, in the effort of transparency, we will provide updates moving forward. But the president has made it very clear he's open to a deal with China.
Why is he optimistic that China's going to make a deal or wants to make a deal? If they're not talking, where's that optimism come
He's
from?
optimistic.
Why would any of our allies work with us to isolate China in a trade war if we're treating friend and foe alike?
True.
You'll have to talk to our allies who are reaching out to us. The phones are ringing off of the hooks. They've made it.
Oh, the phones! He loves the phones. They're ringing so much. The phones, the phones. Which ones are calling, by the way? Oh, we can't say that, by the way. Okay.
Very clear. They need the United States of America. They need our markets. They need our consumer
We
base.
don't need them.
You saw Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in the Oval Office with the president saying that he was going to bring down all of their monetary tariffs and their non-monetary tariff trade barriers as well. We've heard from South Korea. We've heard from Japan. The president has spoken to Vietnam. We have Italy coming to the White House next week. There's a reason for that, Sean, and it's because they need the United States of America and our business model and our markets to survive, and the president is using that leverage to our advantage. Michael.
Hey, thank you, Caroline. Two-part question. China, Beijing says it will simply ignore any further tariff escalations from the U.S. Does President Trump see this as China backing down? And as a follow-up to that, what do you say to people like Shark Tank's Kevin O'Leary who say, you guys simply haven't tariffed China enough?
Look, the tariff rate on China remains where it was yesterday, at the 145% level. The president made it very clear when the United States is punched, he will punch back harder. And he hopes to make a deal that benefits the American worker and our companies that have been ripped off for far too long. And he's finally taking bold and courageous action to do that. You know, taking on China is, in the terms of trade and tariffs, is something that both Democrats and Republicans alike have spoken about for decades. President Trump is finally doing it.
Caroline, real quick, the president of El Salvador is coming to the White House on Monday. Does President Trump want him to bring Kilmar Abrego Garcia with him?
The Supreme Court made their ruling last night very clear that it's the administration's responsibility to facilitate the return, not to effectuate the return.
True.
I believe the Department of Justice just filed another brief in the lower court. I would defer you to that for any updates. But as you mentioned, President Bukele will be here at the White House on Monday to talk about the cooperation that is at an all-time high. And we very much appreciate President Bukele and El Salvador's cooperation and the repatriation of El Salvadorian gang members who the previous administration allowed to infiltrate our country.
Wow.
Sure.
Thank you very much, Caroline. The president spoke quite highly of the great relationship that he has with the Turkish president. We know that the president might be heading off to the Middle East very soon. Is he planning to meet with the Turkish president, either here in the White House or in Turkey? Any plans?
I don't have any details about the president's overseas trip other than to say he was surely going to Saudi Arabia. There could be more countries as part of that trip. We're working on the details, and as I've said repeatedly, we will provide the details of that trip as soon as possible.
The trip to Turkey, or his invitation to the Turkish president, is under consideration.
I'm not going to comment on the details of the trip, but once they're confirmed, I will certainly let you all know. Yes, Stephen.
Thank you, Caroline. I'd like to ask you about presidential health and also about tariffs. On presidential health, are there plans for the president's physician to come here and take our questions? And also, President Trump repeatedly makes remarks about the former president's health. Is he considering using his executive powers to bring any greater transparency there?
As I have said, the president is undergoing his long-scheduled physical. It's a yearly physical that every president receives,
and
we will provide an update on that by the president's physician as soon as we possibly can.
And about the former president and transparency regarding his health, are there...
Well, I can tell you there was certainly a lack of transparency from the former president, from the entire former administration, and frankly, a lot of people in this room when it came to the health and the competence of the former president of the United States, Joe Biden. There was one of the greatest cover-ups and, frankly, political scandals this nation has ever seen. It's been unraveled in some recent books that are being written by journalists who engaged in that cover-up and scandal, which is quite ironic. But this president is clearly committed to transparency. You in this room see him and hear from him on a daily basis. You in this room know from covering him, it's hard to keep up with him. He is a machine working around the clock every single day. And the physician, after today's physical, will provide an update on the report in the effort of transparency.
If I could ask about tariffs, there have been big swings this week in the Treasury bond yields. There's a theory that it might be because of China dumping these as leverage, driving up costs for U.S. loans like mortgages. Does the White House have evidence that this is in fact a result of Chinese dumping? And if so, is there a message on that?
Not to my knowledge, but I would check in with the Treasury Department on that. I can tell you, I know our Secretary of Treasury, Scott Bessent, is keeping a very close eye on the bond market. He spoke about it at the White House this week, and I know he's keeping his eyes on it day to day.
Andy's epic.
Thanks. Thank you, Caroline. So the administration, I have an administration source who's telling me that we're weeks away from the first deal with the country over tariffs. Where is the administration? How soon can we see that? And what country is that? First one.
I won't reveal or get ahead of our trade team as these negotiations are obviously ongoing, but I can tell you very good progress has been made. Jameson Greer was on television this morning, and I spoke to him, and he confirmed that more than 15 offers are already on the table, which is remarkable in just a mere matter of days. And as I said earlier, we've heard from more than 75 countries around the world. This is a team effort. The president has a team of great, brilliant advisors who have been with him every step of the way, and all of them will be divvying up the workload. And I just want to give the president and his trade team credit for taking this on. This is a massive undertaking. There's no doubt about it. We take take it very seriously. The president is determined to renegotiate global trade on behalf of American workers. And again, you've seen people on both sides of the aisles calling for this for years, but I think no other president lacked the courage or maybe the work ethic or the stamina to take on such a task. And I know there were some questions about the president's delayed departure earlier to Walter Reed. I'd like to address it was because he was working on this very issue, so he was running a bit behind this morning.
On the 90-day pause, what would the president need to see in order to extend that 90-day pause?
We're not saying anything. No details.
Well, I think the president addressed this yesterday when he said he's hoping that there will be good deals made before the 90 days is up, and we will cut those deals as soon as we possibly can, country by country, tailor-made deals for each and every country as they all propose unique challenges and unique assets to each country, advantages rather. And when that 90-day mark hits, the president will make that decision then.
One more if I could on a different subject. So a bird earlier attacked my colleague Peter Doocy during a live shot at
I'm wondering
the White
if that's why Peter is absent from the seat. Is he doing okay?
He's recovering.
Has anyone checked on him?
He's recovering. Is anyone looking into that incident?
I could check in with GSA to see if anybody here is looking into it. I also understand there was a mouse in the briefing room earlier today, so I'm hoping somebody checked in on that, as I'm hoping it doesn't run up here and distract me. That would be a good way for all of you to distract me, actually. Have a mouse come run up here.
So epic.
So I'll get an answer for you on that, out of respect for our good friend Peter. Jeff.
Why is American consumer confidence so low?
Look, I think there's a great
retarded.
optimism in this economy, great optimism for the American people, a lot of reason for people to feel optimistic. The president is, as I just said, trying to renegotiate the global trade agenda that has ripped off the American people for far too long. As he said, this is going to be a period of transition. He wants consumers to trust in him, and they should trust in him. Look at what he did in his first term. And I just want to reiterate all of the reasons to be confident since you asked, Jeff. For those watching at home, yesterday the CPI report, inflation declined massively. Consumer prices are dropping for the first time in years. Energy prices are down. In fact, oil prices are down 20% since this president took office. Wholesale prices fell again. There have been trillions of dollars in investments into this country. Every day, the president is signing executive orders to cut regulation, especially when it comes to Environmental Protection Agency, our energy industry. That's going to unleash the economic boom in this country that we saw in the president's first term. So trust in President Trump. He knows what he's doing. This is a proven economic formula.
What is he asking of Americans at this time? He talked about transition costs, transition problems. Is he asking something specific for Americans to do?
No, I think the president is asking for Americans trust in Trump, as I just said, trust in his economic agenda and formula. It's a proven formula that works. And by the way, clearly the American people do, in fact, trust him because they did just overwhelmingly elect him to this office. Jennifer.
Is he going, I'm asking about the physical, is he undergoing any general anesthesia? And can you outline any of the other tests that he's doing today?
He is not. He is undergoing quite a few tests, imaging. Again, it's a it's a yearly physical, so there's quite a lot that goes into it to make sure the president is accomplishing all of his goals, and we will provide a readout of that as soon as we can.
And will you be committed to releasing all of the results, as many of the results as possible?
Of course, yes. The president's physician will do that. I spoke with him this morning.
Sure. Will you guys also consider releasing the president's fitness plan? He actually looks healthier than ever before. Healthier than he did 8 years ago, and I'm sure everybody in this room could agree. Is he working out with Bobby Kennedy? And is he eating less McDonald's?
Oh my God.
I can confirm the president is in very good shape, as you see on a daily basis here. And in that vein, thank God it's Friday. It's been a very long and busy week here at the White House. We will see you all on Monday, and we will release the results of that report as soon as we can. Have a great weekend, everybody. Thank you.
Have a great weekend.
Any other Glazers in the chat? Jesus.